Hello, welcome again. It's Mallory Peterson at the Shawamigan Food Co-op here in Ashland, Wisconsin. I'm in the classroom to talk to you today about some tips and tricks when it comes to cake decorating. So first of all, what I want to say, most importantly, is to be in a really good mindset about your cake and about your baking. You want to stay as prepared as you can, and really what that means is getting your cake baked ahead of time, making sure you have enough time to cool everything, mixing your frosting up, and having it ready to go when you're ready. Mixing up colors of frosting is also a great idea to do right off the bat. Sometimes it takes a minute for the food coloring to saturate the frosting. Therefore, once you mix your colors up, you're going to need to let your bucket sit for about 20 minutes. Give it another stir and you'll notice that the color has become more bold. Even overnight, colors can become very dark. So you just want to be aware of the colors you're using and mix them up ahead of time. Give them plenty of time to fully saturate your frosting so that you have the correct color. If you're worried about frosting changing overnight, then mix your frosting colors and use them immediately. When it comes to frosting colors, another good tip is a little bit goes a long way. You can use one color and make different shades or tints of it. And sometimes just one color in a variant of tints can really make a cake pop. Monochromatic cakes are simple, they're very elegant, and you can use them for almost any occasion. Coming to color, one or two colors is great, even three. So my usual is to pick three colors, whether they're a tint of the same color, so you have one color and a tint, plus a second color, which does give you three bowls of different colors, or if you use three different colors altogether. But I think if you can use up to three colors, you can make a beautiful cake. Let's see here. Okay, when it comes to trimming your cake, there are many different ways to do so, but I find it most easily with a large serrated knife, which is something you'll want to have an adult help you with if you're a young child. But another easy way to level out your cake is to use a thin wire, which is much safer for a young child to use. They make tools that have a handle on either end of the wire that you simply pull through the cake. Give me a second. They also make saws that are on legs that you simply saw over the top of your cake as your saw rests on the table, and you can adjust that saw up and down. There are so many tools, and it can feel overwhelming like you need to have them all, but truthfully, what you have in your kitchen will probably work just as well as any one of those fancy tools. And the key is to really just getting to know what you have in your kitchen and working with what you've got. One second here, Sarah. Okay. After you've trimmed your cakes and before you start frosting, a lot of people will recommend chilling your cake. Now, this is really good if you have time to chill your cake. It's also great if you're using a softer frosting because the temperature of the cake will firm up the frosting. The frosting will become cooler and will become thicker. This can work very well in cases where you're new at frosting a cake or where you're making a very large cake and you want to make sure that the cake itself stays firm while you're decorating. One thing you don't want to do is to frost a frozen cake. What will happen if you do that is your frosting will also freeze to your cake, and as soon as your cake starts to warm up, it's going to expand and crack your frosting, ruining any beautiful work you already did. So you'll have to patch that one up. I personally like to ice a room temperature cake. You don't want anything warmer, it'll melt your frosting. So I let my cakes cool at room temperature, and that's when I handle them. I usually bake and decorate cakes right before I need them. Sometimes I don't have room in my refrigerator to store the cake, or usually it's just something that I wait till last minute to do. Once you have an order and you know how long it'll take you, it doesn't take long to get a cake whipped up and out. But it's up to you to make the plan. I don't know, Sarah, I didn't script that.
No, that was good.
Let's see. If you are layering cakes, it can be quite intimidating to make them very tall. However, a nice tall cake is always beautiful and gives you plenty to serve to many guests. So what a lot of people will do when they make a cake that is 3 layers or more, they will put a dowel inside of their cake to keep it straight. So you can buy wooden dowels or plastic dowels at a craft store, even at like a local hardware store, you can find wooden dowels. And the key is to just cut it so that the top of the dowel is hidden inside the cake. That way you can frost over it. Now the dowel will keep your cake in place from sliding one way or the other. If you have to transport your cake in a vehicle or while you're walking your cake of a distance, it'll help keep it straight. Just make sure you remind the person cutting the cake that there's a dowel in there so they're not so surprised when they go to cut it. And of course, you cannot eat the dowel, but you can wash it and reuse it. So that's a good note. Let's see here. The dowel. Now we're going to talk about, okay, let's see. That's as far as we're going to go today on tips and tricks for icing and stacking a cake. Next, we're going to get to some piping. Now, one thing a lot of people want to decorate their cakes with, and what is most traditionally used as cake decorating, are flowers. Putting fresh flowers on a cake is always a great way to go, but we don't always have fresh flowers available. And really, if you want to start with like the basic tradition of decorating cake, flowers is the way to go. So in the previous video, we did a demonstration on how to pipe a rose with a flower nail, and we're going to do that again, but we also have some other methods to pipe roses as well that I want to share with you. So here we go. All right, so what I have here is a Wilton 104 tip. It's a rose petal tip, and I have a flower nail. And so what you want to do is be able to spin this in your hand. You're going to twist your bag nice and tight between your pointer finger and your thumb, and you're going to make sure that the bottom widest part of this shape is on the bottom. It looks like a teardrop, so you want to make sure it's down. Next, you're going to pipe a little pile. That's what we're going to build our rose onto. And so when you start with the wide part down, we're basically gonna squeeze and swoop up and spin our needle a little bit. We're gonna angle the opening of our tip towards the center of the frosting pile. And we're gonna continue squeezing and turning our nail. You start your petal in the middle of the last petal. And as we turn and layer, we're going to slowly angle our tip out to make it look like our petals are opening up. They make larger nails, so you can make larger flowers. And we're just going to go all the way around until our rose is finished. Now this takes some practice, but don't be afraid to try. Once you get it on the nail like so, you can take it off with a pair of scissors and place it on your cake. Now, something some people do with buttercream, and that's what this is an American buttercream, is they would put a small piece of parchment on top of the nail. They'll pipe their rose, and then they'll take the parchment and the rose off and set it in the refrigerator. This rose will get hard enough that you can actually take it off the paper with your hands, and you can place it on the cake any way you want. If you're having a hard time handling a flower made out of soft frosting, this would be a great way to help you firm up your flowers so that they're easier for you to put on your cake. It just takes a little more time and room in the refrigerator, but it's totally worth it. So another way you can make a rose, here I have, this is a Wilton 2D star tip, okay? And this is large, this is big enough to decorate the top of a cupcake. So that's what I'm going to do with it. And I'm going to show you how to make a rose with it. Once again, I mix my frosting, I put it in my bag, and we're going to twist this nice and tight in our hand. And here we have a cupcake. So what you want to do is you're going to squeeze the entire time, and you're going to make a swirl, starting in the center and working your way out. I'm going to set this down to do this. So we'll start in the middle, we'll give it a good squeeze, and we're just going to swirl all the way around until it's to the edge of our cupcake and kind of fade the end in. And there you have it, a beautiful rose. This looks fabulous, not only on top of cupcakes, but excellent on top of cakes. So we have a couple different roses to look at. Now the wonderful thing about a star tip is that it can make other flowers as well, just by setting it down and giving it a press and picking it back up. It makes a little star-shaped flower. Then you could take this is a Wilton number 3 writing tip. It has some yellow frosting in it, and we'll just go in there in the center and fill that in. Another flower tip we have here, this is a Wilton 190. This is a flower tip that has the center taken out of it, as you can see. This will for sure leave a hole. This is the same concept as the star tip, where you can basically set it down on the cake, squeeze it out, pick it up, and it leaves a petal. But really, the best way to use this tip is when you're squeezing it, you twist your wrist, so as it swirls, it makes a wider petal. Like so. This takes a little practice, and I'm not great at it. But these flower tips come in all sizes, and they have different shapes for the petals as well. This is a really beautiful and easy way to make some flowers. We'll take our little yellow and fill in the middle. Another really nice way to make flowers are to use your rose tip to make a circle of petals. Sarah did this a bit earlier. Pretending the parchment is our cake, you just simply make a petal at a time, going around in a circle. Depending on the flower you're making, would depend on how many petals you put. And once you get one layer down, you can start in the middle on top to make another layer. And all I'm doing is shifting my tip. That looks pretty good. To make some layers. So if you wanted to, you could make the inside of this flower like a star shape with that number 4 tip. Here I have the number 10 round tip again. We were making hearts before, remember? A squeeze and a pull, squeeze and a pull. You can make a heart pattern all the way down a cupcake or the side of a cake. You could easily make that as a border. But these also are great for petals. Just pull it in, squeeze, and release. And when you release, you pull it in. This one you could also layer, just like we layered the last rose tips. But this time, we'll just put a piece of candy in the center. There you go, there's a cute flower. Another flower you can make with a rose tip and a pin is a carnation. And what we'll do the same thing with our rose tip. We're gonna make a pile that we're gonna put our petals on. And then when it comes to a carnation, you basically are making jagged edged petals. So these, you're basically just squeezing in the whole time, turning the tip and making a bunch of petals by moving your tip up and down. That's what I call a carnation. Once again, you take it off with your scissors, put it on top of your cake. As you can see, my frosting is getting a little bit warm, in which case you can firm it up in the refrigerator for a little bit. So those are a few flowers. When it comes to leaves, let's see. This is my favorite leaf tip. It is a Wilton number 67. And this leaf tip, as you can see, has an extra little V cut out in the middle. This makes a vein down the leaf. I'll show you. See that vein down the leaf? I just love that. Nice and thick. So you can make short little round leaves. Fast squeeze and a pull. Here we go. So tuck that up underneath your petals. Fast squeeze and a pull. Tuck it up in there. Fast squeeze and a pull. You need a little bigger leaf. Give it a harder squeeze. So this one we're going to squeeze harder. See how it gave me a bigger leaf? Squeeze it harder. Filled right up, didn't it? Another thing I like to do with a leaf tip is to make pine trees. So I'll give you a quick little example of that. If I were going to make a pine tree, we'll say, we'll just make it a couple inches high. You're gonna start with the bottom row of your tree. Right? So these are all the branches that are sticking out at the bottom, right? And the next row is going to come inward to the top of the tree. So each row is going to get thinner and thinner and thinner as we layer on top of one another. We're just making literally layers of boughs. And then for that top one, you make that stick straight up. If you see anywhere you need to tuck another one in there, just tuck another one in there. That's my version of a pine tree. You can come up with your own. But it's really fun to use this leaf tip. I would also use it to make seaweed. This is an example. If I was gonna do an underwater scene, if you just squeeze it consistently, it makes these ruffles. So anytime I made an undersea cake, I would just make these beautiful long pieces of seaweed. It doesn't necessarily have to be seaweed. You could call that any green. You could call that a fern. It'd be excellent as a fern. So there are some fun things to do with a leaf tip. So another way to make flowers is to use a Russian tip. Now, I have an example of some Russian tips here. I have some examples of a Russian tip. Here's a flower Russian tip. Here's another. The outside would make the petals. The inside would make the stamen and the pistils. This one is a rose Russian tip. Basically, the idea is you're piping all of the petals at one time. And how you're going to do this is you would put this down on the cake, squeeze and pull straight up. We'll get a shot of what these look like once I make a few over here. You just squeeze and pull up straight. It's a little tall. We'll have Sarah come over and get a good shot of this. Then you can go ahead, put your greeneries coming up.
We'll take some pictures of these ones.
Okay. Russian tips are super fun to work with. You can mix all different kinds of colors in there. You get the idea. So when it comes to writing, I have to say the easiest tips to use would be a 3 and up. If I have to use a 2 or a 1, it's just a very, very small hole. It would only be used for like a very small writing, which is, you won't really find yourself doing a lot of on a cake. So 3 is as small as I like to go. And that's even for an 8-inch round cake, especially for cupcakes. And then as the cakes get bigger, then you can use a higher number, which means a larger nozzle. When it comes to writing, use the hand you always write with, and start with the handwriting that you always use. If you're somebody who always uses cursive, stick with cursive. If you do block lettering, start with block lettering. If you have some crazy mix of the two, that is fine. Use the handwriting you have and get that down, and then go from there. So you want to just make sure that it's legible and centered. And having writing centered on a cake can be pretty difficult, but you can go ahead and get out a measuring tool and make little marks on your cake to write inside. It's okay to give yourself some guidelines. And if you do that by just making a tiny little mark in the cake with a toothpick, that's perfect. You can always fill that tiny little bit in later. So you also want to make sure your bag is nice and tight in the palm of your hand. You don't want to have too much to hold on to. Then it's going to be difficult to write. So you want just the right amount of frosting in your hand. So everyone's going to be different. Now, I write cursive all the time, so that's what I start with. It's okay to not have it be one long swoop of frosting. It's okay to start and stop. Don't be hard on yourself, and start small with some initials, right? My initials are M, C, P. See how I could start and stop as I needed to? Now that's not perfect, but this is just an example. I also like to write in cursive, so I'm just going to go for it. It's okay to start and stop where you need to. And I have a steady pressure on my bag. I'm constantly squeezing when I did that. The only time I stopped squeezing was after I came down for this first line. I stopped and then I started again. That's probably your ultimate goal when it comes to writing cursive. As you can see, it layers up on itself a little bit, but I never had a problem with that. I always kind of liked that. I'm not very good at block lettering, but as you can see, this paper, it has a really nice grid on it. And there's a little bit of a trick that I can show you with this paper. It doesn't work every time, but it's worth a try if you're really struggling with writing. So we'll get that set up for you. Ready? Okay, so a little trick here for writing on a cake is to make yourself a transfer. So what I did was wrote very bold on a piece of paper what I want to write on the cake. You're gonna slip it underneath a piece of parchment paper. And in the color frosting you're going to use a very small tip. This one's actually a 3. I would like to use a smaller one if I had one, but 3 should be okay. And what you're gonna do is trace over these letters. Now, when you're writing, it's always good to use your opposite hand as a brace to keep your hand steady. So a lot of the time, you'll see me holding my writing hand with my left hand, and that's just to keep me good and steady so I'm not shaky when I write. It's kind of, there are times where you can't touch anything and you just kind of have to free float, but if that's not the case, then brace yourself really well so you stay nice and steady. So here we go. I'm just gonna trace this. I love you. Then what you're going to do next is take another piece of parchment paper and lay it right on top of those letters. And make sure the frosting touches this layer. This is going to make your transfer sheet. Here we go. Once you peel it off, you've got a little transfer here to use as a stencil. So what you do, place that face down on your cake right where you want it. Give it a gentle little rub on. And this gives you a guide. And this might be hard to see because of the coloring. But all we did was make a transfer onto, well, this piece of parchment, which would be the cake, in which case you go over it one more time. Right? You cover your transfer. This works especially well with buttercream. As buttercream dries, it creates a bit of a crust on top. So when you lay this transfer down on top of that crust, it won't stick to the rest of the frosting. So if this is something you're gonna do, make sure that your buttercream has hardened to a soft crust on the outside. So next what I want to show you is how to fold a pastry bag out of parchment paper. And really all you need to do that is a square piece of paper. I've already cut this one out of parchment paper that had a grid on it, so it made it very easy. You can purchase already cut parchment paper that folds right up easily as well. But if you don't have that on hand, what you do is you're going to take your square parchment paper, fold it corner to corner to make a triangle. You want to try to make your angles as perfect as possible. Clearly this isn't perfect, but it'll get the job done. Next, you'll take your triangle, wide and down, and you're going to fold the inner corners up like so. You're going to fold it into a cone shape. Like so. You're going to have an inner pocket. And you want the bottom of your cone to be nice and tightly closed. So by twisting your paper towards the outside, see how I'm kind of holding it and rolling it around? You can make that hole shut very nicely. And really, these extra tips will just line up with your first triangle tip. You see how I did that? Should we do it again? I'm going to take the sides, curl them in. But it's not easy to work with. Curl them in and around like so. All the way till they meet in the back. Okay. So, I'm going to make sure our hole's nice and closed down there. Make it as good of a point as you can. And then once you get it there, you're going to press it down flat and fold it in that spot. So when you open it up, you have the spot where your frosting is going to go. And this extra paper you're just going to fold back. And it's going to kind of hold it in shape. Sometimes giving it a couple of rolls is what it needs to stay nice and tight. You can also tape it, but lots of people staple it. So here we have, after all, a pastry bag. What's great about this is you didn't have to pay a lot of money for it. It's a one-time use, you can toss it out, but you can also use these to save your frosting in the fridge. You can make them any size you need. They're not hard to roll. The more you do it, the easier it'll get. And that way, if you don't have a plastic bag or a pastry bag at home, or let's say you used them all up and you need another bag, knowing how to roll one will just save you so much time and make it more creative for your decorating needs. So when it comes to putting a tip inside of this, you can simply snip off the end until the tip fits in, but you can also use this tip in place of a metal tip. So if you cut yourself a little hole in the tip, it'll turn into a circle and you've got a writing tip. I'm going to try to write on this rose to give you an example. Okay, so after we rolled our parchment paper up and we cut a straight hole off the tip, it'll make it nice and round, and it's something you can write with or make petals with or do a beaded design with. It just depends on how deep you cut it into the paper is how large the bead will actually be. So I just want to give you a little example here of how we can write with this. I'm going to write the word love on top of this beautiful rose cupcake. And now to give you an example of another shape that we can cut out of a parchment paper bag. I have a bag I already prepared here. It's very teeny tiny, but it's perfect for just a small decorating project. What we're going to do is cut a V into the tip of this. So the V is going to go up towards the sky, and it's going to be perfectly in the middle of the parchment paper. And this V shape, I'm going to make a big mess here. This V shape is actually a leaf shape, where the points of the V are going to be the veins in the leaves. So I'll put some green in here. Use that down there. All right, I got it down in there, and you can see the point of my leaf. And you just pipe these on this rose here. There you have it. So this concludes our tips and tricks at the Chequamegon Food Co-op. As far as cake decorating goes, I don't know how I should say this. So this concludes our tips and tricks on cake decorating here at the Chequamegon Food Co-op. There are so many things that we can learn and teach each other, so hopefully we can do this again soon. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Bye.